Okay, so basically we're going to be talking about natural selection and genetic engineering. This is a part of section C, continuity and variation, that is a part of the CSEC biology syllabus. So basically this is just a small section, or basically just a small portion of that part basically. So we're going to be going in depth on natural selection and also genetic engineering, and we're just going to be comparing both of them, seeing what's the difference, what's the principles behind both of them, and overall what's the purpose of natural selection and genetic engineering. So let's just go and get into that. So before we get started, go ahead and check out the free resources right here. You can go and get free content on both channels right here. You have the CSEC study guide, and then you also have tutoring right here, which this one is paid or there's a fee, but basically it is available if you want to email tonyashley@gmail.com if you need tutoring. But these are free stuff, and this is also free stuff, so you can go ahead and utilize both of them, right? So let's get into it. So when we're talking about any topic at all, literally just any topic, we have to first define it, and that is exactly what we're going to be doing. We're talking about natural selection, and we're also talking about genetic engineering. Before we even get into it, right? If I look back at my high school days, before we even get into what anything is, just the name alone kind of give you a hint of what both of these are. When you hear natural selection, you're thinking natural. When you hear genetic engineering, just the word engineering alone, you know that engineering means that we tamper, or basically there's some human involvement in order to make something work. Once you hear the word engineering, and you know what genetic means, we're talking about genes and we're talking about genetics. So let's backtrack. Let's start with natural selection. And if nothing else stands out to you, the word natural should literally tell you that it's untampered, it's by nature. We humans don't play a part in natural selection. It is literally natural. It happens by nature, by God. We don't tamper with it. That's the clearest thing. So if you ever go into the exam and you don't remember what the actual definition is, the name itself, dissect the name. It's called natural selection. What does it mean to select something, to pick something naturally? That's basically what natural selection is. And basically the definition that we have here is saying that it's the process by which organisms with favorable traits are more likely to survive and reproduce, pass on those traits to the next generation. What is that telling you? Basically, what this is telling you is that in nature, only the fittest of the fittest are going to survive. So if you are fit and you are healthy, you are likely to live a long life. If somebody else they get sick a lot, they have a weak immune system, they're probably going to die. So basically that's the principle behind natural selection. It is saying it is the survival of the fittest. The ones with the most favorable traits for their environment are going to survive. So let's just say that you live in a particular environment that it benefits a particular organism to be small. You have to be small, it's not gonna work out at all. Right? Or if it's another type of organism and they have to be big because it benefits them to be big. So that's the principle behind natural selection. It means the survival of the fittest. So it is almost like a race. So the person, if we're having like a normal sports day race, you have two people line up at the starting line. One of them is probably really short, and that don't mean say the person necessarily cannot run fast, but we do know that people with longer legs have an advantage more than other people. So basically, both are at the starting line, and one has longer legs. Now, the person with longer legs, they actually have an advantage, right? That doesn't necessarily means them have a win, but they already have an advantage to winning because they take bigger steps than the person who has short legs. So basically, that's the principle behind natural selection. It's talking about the organisms that have the most favorable traits and are likely to pass on those traits to the next generation because if if this organism they have long legs, it makes sense to have long legs for them, and it's a favorable trait. When they have kids, those long legs are going to be passed on. It's just a survival of the fittest kind of situation. So it is all geared towards the environment. So just get that natural selection, that is what it means. Survival of the fittest. Then now we're talking about the role of natural selection in evolution. So evolution is just such a big topic that they have been researching and researching and researching, and even right now it is not completely researched. There's more research to be done, right? And basically evolution speaks to the change in populations over a long period of time. So we're looking back from humans coming straight up when they used to say, oh, we were monkeys or apes or whatever we evolved from, right? You know the history, go back and check the history. But basically, they say that we evolved and became Homo sapiens, that's the human species right now, but evolution essentially, right? So it's basically the change in population over a period of time, a long period of time. So we don't mean last week, we don't mean last year, we don't even mean 10 years ago. We mean like 100 years plus, basically, right? A very long time coming straight up. That's what evolution talks about. Now, we know that natural selection is a driver of evolution. What does that mean? If natural selection is a driver of evolution, we're saying that it has an impact on the next generation essentially. Because if evolution is a change in population over a long period of time, and we say that natural selection affects evolution, we mean that it affects it in the way that only the fittest of the fittest are going to survive. So if you have 100 organisms and it's only 10 of them in that population have the favorable traits, then is only the 10 going to survive and the other 90 are going to die. And it's basically that 10 are going to reproduce and then their offspring are going to also have the favorable traits that they had, right? And there's some trick to this, but we're not going to get into that yet, or I don't think at this level, right? But basically, natural selection affects evolution because it is picking the fittest persons, it is picking the most favorable traits to pass on to the next generation, and that next generation is going to be the next population that's there. The individuals in that new population are going to be made up from essentially the parents, right? So the parents, natural selection picks the favorable traits. Those parents survive, they have kids, and in turn, it does affect evolution because it's changing the population, right? 1 million years ago, or however long, 1 million years ago, having, let's just say, for example, having short legs were advantageous 1 million years ago. And then a million years later, because natural selection influenced it, now short legs are not favorable. So it's now long legs, just for example purposes only. So basically, the role of natural selection in evolution, we're saying that it selects individuals with favorable traits. It increases the survival and reproductive success. It causes beneficial traits to become more common. Exactly. That's basically what I was saying just now. Because if you have 100 people in a population and only 10 out of the 100 have those favorable traits, the 90 are going to die because the environment is working against them basically. That 10 that did survive, they are going to reproduce and then their offsprings are going to have the favorable traits that 10 did have basically. And that is what is going to cause these beneficial traits to become more common. So basically, the next generation is going to be made up of only favorable traits. And what can happen is that you have dominant and recessive genes. Let's just say somebody that they had the favorable trait, but they had the recessive um, allele for something else, and that's probably the only way for something else to become reintroduced into the next population, or some catastrophe, some natural disaster happened, or some other external factor can affect the population. Why there's not only beneficial traits, but basically there's a lot to it, right? But don't worry about that, right? And it also leads to adaptation to the environment, yes. So basically, um, in that population with the same 100, only 10 of them had the long legs, right? Only the 10 of them. And the other 90 died because them, it never worked out for them, it never made sense. And those long legged people, they are more adapted. Let's just say that let's just go back to like maybe Adam and Eve days in the garden, and let's just say this is all just example purposes, but let's just say that all the trees were very tall, and it only makes sense because back in the day, you don't have a stove and all that stuff. So you have to be tall if you're going to pick fruits and you need food to eat and all that stuff. So basically, it was advantageous, just for example purposes only, right? And then we know, as I said before, it drives evolution and it forms new species. So natural selection will always pick the fittest of the fittest to pass on those genes, right? So it is one of the major drivers of evolution. Now, what are some advantages of natural selection? We say it promotes adaptation to the environment, it increases survival and reproductive success, maintains or improves the population fitness, and we talk about fitness a lot. And we say if you don't remember anything else about natural selection, just remember that it is a process by which it selects or it picks the fittest of the fittest in the population, right? So every individual is held to that standard of being fit. So it's not like, oh, the entire population is going to be healthy or the entire population is going to be fit. No, it is done by individuals. So it is the survival of the fittest, almost like when reproduction takes place, or when a woman gets pregnant. Let's just say all the sperm cells, all of them rush towards the egg, and you know that only one will actually fertilize the egg. So think of it like that. The fastest one to get to the egg is going to be fertilized. That is natural selection right there. So the sperm sperm cells, a lot of them are produced, but only one can actually fertilize the egg and actually get the woman pregnant, basically. So you have to look at it from that perspective. So that's an example of natural selection right there. Just always remember it is done by the survival of the fittest. And as I said before, it drives evolution and it drives speciation and it eliminates harmful traits over time because natural selection only deals with favorable traits. That's it. If it's harmful, if it's not beneficial, natural selection will get rid of it. What are some disadvantages? So it's a very slow process, and as I said before, it's like natural selection is not a yesterday, it's not a last week, it's not last year, it's not 10 years ago. It takes many generations, many generations. It's not a quick process. It's a long time coming from caveman days, coming straight up. That cannot make up evolution. And we say that natural selection is a major driver of evolution. It's coming all the way up from then. And another disadvantage, it says it may not keep up with the rapid environmental changes. And this was the point that I did not really want to get into, but since it's here, what this is basically meaning is that the environment is not constant. So 1 million years ago, your ancestors having a particular trait was beneficial 1 million years ago. As we said before, let's just say short leg, long leg. Let's just say that back then we said that short legs were not a good trait to have. It never made no sense. And so only the tall people survived basically, right? And actually, let me use a real world example with Darwin's finches. So is not constant, meaning that let's just say, for example, um, let's just say, for example, way back, let's just say that you have the population of birds, and basically there was a drought. So let's just say there was a drought, and you have the finches, and so it made sense that the finches are birds, so basically it made sense that they had hard, tough beaks in order to crack the seeds, like the seeds that came from the tree, right? And that was the selection, that was natural selection at work. And so basically these birds, they evolved to have these tough, hard beaks because there was a drought at that time, and so it made sense to have those broad and tough and hard beaks in order to crack the seeds, basically, right? And basically, that is what natural selection chose for that population. And the birds that had short and like soft beaks, they weren't able to crack the seeds, and basically they starved and they died. And this is actually a real life story. I think it was Darwin. I don't remember what experiment it was, but this is actually something that really happened. And but you can definitely go and look it up and see which experiment this was. But basically, natural selection picked these tough, hard beaks because at that time there was a drought affecting the population of birds, and basically it made sense that the survival of the fittest, the ones with the soft beaks, they died, or most of them died, and it was mainly the ones with the tough, hard beaks, those were the ones that lived. And then down the line, a flood happened, and when that flood happened, the seeds became softer, and then natural selection ended up bringing back the soft beaked birds, basically. So basically, those soft beaked birds, they started to dominate again, basically. But basically, we're trying to say that natural selection doesn't always keep up with rapid environmental changes because it's such a slow process. Because when the drought happened, natural selection was like, okay, only the only the big the birds with the big beaks, the tough beaks that can crack the seeds, they're going to survive. It picked those because they could actually feed themselves, right? And then the other birds that were not so, their beaks were short and soft and couldn't chew the seed like the other birds. Natural selection ruled them out, and basically a very small um population probably survived, or maybe not at all. And then some years down the line, something happened, and natural selection has to bring back those soft beak birds. So basically, that's what we're trying to say, that natural selection doesn't always keep up with the environmental changes because and natural selection is so slow. So while it was there picking the tough hard beaks, and those were having offsprings, and those having offsprings, they did not realize, let's just say for example 10 years later there would be a drought. It had no idea that, okay, you know what, there's going to be a drought and we need to select another trait. Natural selection is, it's basically slow, it laps basically. So that's what I mean by that. Another disadvantage, it can lead to extinction if organisms cannot adapt, and that actually goes back to the same story or the same experiment I was trying to bring back, that if those, and as I said before, majority of those birds with the soft short beaks, most of them died. Most majority died because they could not feed on the seeds because their beaks were not strong enough. So it can lead to extinction of a particular species if they cannot adapt to that environment. Another disadvantage is favors only traits beneficial for survival, not necessarily for other purposes. Okay, so this can really mean that natural selection will pick the traits for survival, so it doesn't take into consideration something like, let's just say, um, let's just say that some organisms are able to camouflage, right? And camouflaging is very important for many animals. Like they need to camouflage in order to protect themselves, to hide from predators and all that stuff. So they need to do that. And then there are some other animals that do not camouflage because they use their pretty colors, like maybe the peacock, or I don't remember which other animal right now, but they they are not hiding because they use those pretty colors. You have some birds that they sing and all kinds of stuff basically that would make them noticeable by predators, all for the sake of sexual reproduction. So basically, they needed to mate. So natural selection doesn't care about mating, or it doesn't care about um, sexual reproduction. So that's what it kinds of this is what it means basically. It's only really focusing on survival. It's not focusing on, oh, you need to mate and reproduce. So that's basically what it means. And then another disadvantage is it reduces genetic diversity in some cases, because if you have two um let's just go back to the bird example. Some of them had hard, tough beaks. Some of them had soft, short, not strong beaks. And if they get rid of the not strong beaks and only leave the ones with the tough, hard beaks, then you know that that's less diversity, because all of them in the population are going to have the same thing. Or even if we go back to the long legs, short legs, if we ruled out, if natural selection picked selected against short legs, I know everybody have tall leg, everybody have long leg now, then that's less diversity. The population is going to basically look the same. Alright, so we talked about natural selection already. Migration is very simple. It's another driver of evolution. It's basically when um, a species or a population moves from one place to another, and then you have mutations, change in the DNA sequence. You have genetic drift, which is completely random, and it causes changes in the allele frequency. So basically, these four are drivers of evolution. They can affect how the population will look later on down the line. And so, yeah. Then you have artificial selection. So basically, artificial selection or selective breeding is a process in which humans select the desired trait to pass to the next generation of offsprings of plants or animals. And this is what I was talking about before. We're not talking about natural selection and artificial selection and even genetic engineering. From the name artificial selection, you kind of know what this is already. You hear natural, you're thinking about nature, you're thinking about God, you're thinking about untampered. When you hear artificial selection, you're thinking about tampering. You're thinking about we as humans made some tweaks. We did something because it's artificial. It's not, I won't say it's not real, but it's not natural basically. So we are the ones that pick the traits that we want to pass on to the next generation. In natural selection, nature does that. We play zero role in natural selection. Um we can predict natural selection to a certain extent, but we cannot interfere with it or tell natural selection to do this or to do that. It happens naturally over a long period of time. Artificial selection, let's just say we have an example here with the cows. So let's just say our cows, we get a certain amount of milk per day from the cow, right? Normal cow would grow the cow, have the cow and everything, right? But then we as humans are like, no, we have factories, we need to supply them. People need cow's milk, people need skim milk, people need all types of milk. And then you say, okay, we need more production from the cows. And then we artificially change something within the cow in order to get higher milk production. Even with chickens, We said it, the chickens, they lay some eggs. I would say, we need more eggs for production, for mass scale. We have the factories and we need to sell it to the supermarket and everybody need this. And so basically it's us tampering to get the desired trait that we want so we can pass it on to the next generation, right? So if we want larger eggs or if we want more milk, artificial selection can be done in order to get that. This is just comparing artificial selection right here, talking about its advantages and its disadvantages. So basically, one, it produces organisms with desired traits, and basically we're the ones picking the trait. We say, okay, the cow, we need more milk, so we're the one putting in the trait that we want. Increases food production. As we said before, if we get more egg, if we want more milk, natural selection can help us to get that. And then it says improves disease resistance in plants and animals. So yes. So basically artificial selection is not only about producing food for the market or getting more milk or getting more eggs. It's also about keeping animals, plants and animals healthy, because let's just say that there is a particular illness that affects these types of animals, and we're trying to build up resistance in them. Then artificial selection is a way for us to get rid of the undesirable trait. We don't want the cow to get sick. We don't want the cow to get this particular illness, because then that will kind of slow up everything. So basically, that's what this means right here. We can improve disease resistance. It can also enhance the quality of products, and in all of this is basically us editing. We're tampering for the better, if you get what I mean. It also helps develop new breeds or varieties. Then you have disadvantages of artificial selection. So basically, the thing about even artificial selection and also natural selection, we spoke about it, is that when it comes to selecting anything, it means choosing. And because you're choosing to enhance this particular trait, it means you're getting rid of variation. You're getting rid of differences between the individuals or the offsprings or the animals, the plants. We're getting rid of that diversity essentially. So that's what's happening, because we're trying to enhance just that particular trait. So we don't want a bad trait. So, but guess what? Those bad traits or those undesirable traits make up a part of what genetic um, variation is. Any type of variation, the good, the bad, everything, that is diversity, when everything is different. And then we say that it can increase susceptibility to certain diseases. So basically, we can get disease resistance, but we can also become more susceptible depending on what within the animal you're tampering with, what they're changing, what they're altering in order to get those traits. These other diseases, it does put them at risk of developing another type of disease depending on the method that they use, sterilization, everything. So it's a two-way street. Another disadvantage is may cause undesirable traits to appear. So basically, artificial selection, it's not natural. We know that, and none of us are God. We cannot predict things. Basically, all we're working on is research. That's what these people work with. They work with research that has been previously published, and that's how they come up with their theories or their hypotheses and say, okay, this can work, this can't work. And the thing about artificial selection is that it's, as far as I know, it's fairly new, as in I mean that there's more research to be done even on genetic engineering. There's a lot more to uncover and dive into, because as I said, there's no way to predict. We don't know anything for 100%. We're not 100% sure about anything. We know to a certain extent what could happen, but we don't know 100%. We don't know how each offspring or each individual or each animal or plant will react. We're working on previous research, and we kind of just winging it, honestly, right? So let's just say they did artificial selection and something can go wrong and undesirable trait pops back up. The next thing about artificial selection is that it requires time and human effort. Time and human effort. And what I believe, and then the last one says it can lead to inbreeding problems. So basically, I believe that it's not everything that can be tampered with should be tampered with. Something we should leave alone because sometimes we don't know what we're putting together or what can happen, and basically requiring time and human effort. It is literally called artificial selection. So it means that it is basically humans. We're doing all of this basically, right? Inbreeding is basically when you meet individuals like siblings or cousins, but basically related in some way, and it can cause problems depending on what they're trying to do or what their end goal is when they carry out this artificial selection. So this is just a table comparing them. Natural selection, long and slow. Artificial selection is very fast. Natural selection, there's more variation in the population. Artificial selection, not much variation in the population. Natural selection, reproducing individuals have characteristics that suit their environments, and then artificial selection, those individuals have characteristics that are desired by us humans. Natural selection, there's less likely to be inbreeding, so offspring are healthier. Artificial selection, there's more likely to be inbreeding and the chance of getting genetic disorders, because just in general, not even just with animals, but it's just a general rule of life that it's almost like mating with somebody from the same family. And there's a reason why, there's ethical reasons why you wouldn't want to mate within your family or anybody you're related to. Ethical reasons, right? Spiritual, religious reasons, a lot of reasons, but from a genetic perspective, it's also very risky because you're mixing like with like, and you don't know what will happen, basically. Um, Natural selection is natural in the wild, and artificial selection, we play a huge role. We are basically the authors, we're the engineers behind it in artificial selection. Now we're getting into genetic engineering, and basically this is where we're getting into the nitty gritty, basically. And it's basically us altering the DNA of an organism to change its traits or produce new characteristics. And engineering, listen, how we see genetic engineering, it means to make, we're going to construct, we're going to alter. That's what this means. And we're focusing on the genes, right? I know that the gene is a segment of DNA. So, what are some advantages of genetic engineering? Produces crops with higher yields. It creates animals with desirable traits. It helps in reproducing medicines and vaccines. It can correct genetic disorders in humans. It reduces the need for chemical pesticides. There are a lot of benefits to genetic engineering, but at the same time, there are risks, there are concerns, there are spiritual concerns, religious concerns, ethical concerns governing this, not just genetic engineering, but also artificial selection, right? So basically, they you're basically there's a potential to reduce genetic diversity, and the second one, and this is actually a big one, can have unforeseen health or environmental effects. And this is the part that a lot of people are concerned about, because genetic engineering, it is relatively new, as in there is a lot more research that needs to be done on this, because they're just starting to do this genetic engineering. It's not like it's been around for millions and millions and millions of years, so we know what's going to happen. No, it's literally a new science, it's a new technique that they're bringing in. And so when you're altering DNA, and you know that DNA is unique, right? Our DNA sequence, it's unique to every individual. That is us tampering with our cells. It's just a complex thing, right? And if you go back to like maybe high school biology when they say that cells are the basic unit of life, um, it's basically a lot. Like nothing is more unique to you than your DNA sequence, and then this genetic engineering is literally altering that DNA sequence, right? As in DNA sequence that God gave you. This genetic engineering is altering, and nobody knows what's going to happen in 100 years. Let's just say they alter a human's um, sequence, or they change up something in the genes. They use a particular technique, and let's just say they use maybe CRISPR or one of those other molecular biology techniques, and we don't know what's going to happen in 100 years time to that human body. And that is kind of why most of these studies are actually carried out on animals first, right? It's mainly carried out in animals, and I think they're used on humans but not as frequent, right? Because they can be used in basically like helping with cancer and other things, but there are ethical concerns. People, and I said before, ethical, spiritual, everything. Nobody knows about the future. No one knows what's going to happen. And if we're talking from like a spiritual perspective or a religious perspective, it's like as I said before, there's nothing more unique about you than your DNA. Your DNA is your DNA. No one shares the same DNA as you. That is the most personal thing about you that makes you up, basically, right? And it's okay. So basically, yeah. There are concerns about that. It's also very expensive, and it requires advanced technology. It requires um advanced expertise, meaning people who actually know their stuff, experts in their fields. So it requires a lot basically. Um, there's also the potential for creating new allergens or toxins. So honestly, the bottom line, the biggest disadvantage about genetic engineering is that we do not know what we're tampering with. We're kind of just winging it. Previous research has been done. We have a little hypothesis, we have a little theory, and we say, okay, it could go like this. We see that it can help, but we don't know the full extent of what can happen because of this, basically. So that's the downside to genetic engineering. Right, so we went through artificial selection, natural selection, genetic engineering, and these are a part of section C of the CSEC biology syllabus. So you can literally go back and look at each slide. We did not go in depth on this. We don't need to go in depth as long as you know what they are, that they're drivers of evolution, and you can define